This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Abom, welcome everyone. And we continue on with our adventures with the Radziner Rebbe. Last week we discussed how in 1887 the Radziner Rebbe really came up with the idea and how he developed it in his second work in 1888. And finally in 1889 he travels to the Great Aquarium in Naples, where he, according to his opinion, discovers what he thought was the chilazon. And we learned about how he was successful in producing so much tcheles that he was able to sell tcheles to 12,000 Jewish families. But what are we going to do? We're going to continue on with the adventure. It's Parshas Korach. So let's see what Parshas Korach tells us, and then we'll see if we could pick up where we left off. The Medrash tells us about the connection, the juxtaposition of Parshas Korach and the end of Parshas Shalach. The end of Parshas Shalach, of course, talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis. And it says at the end of Shalach about the mitzvah of tzitzis, the mitzvah of tcheles. It says, V'nasnu al tzitzis hakanaf psil tcheles. And then it says, Vayikach Korach, and the question is, what did Korach take? Right? Vayikach Korach. Korach took. What did he take exactly? So the Medrash says like this. It's a Medrash Tanchuma, and Bamidbar Rabbah, the Medrash says like this. Vayikach Korach maksiv lamala mino inyan. What does it say before? Before the inyan of Korach, it talks about the mitzvah of tzitzis and the mitzvah to put techeles on the tzitzis. Says the Medrash, what did Korach do? Korach took his tzitzis, he took his tcheles, and he goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says, Moshe, a talis, a beged that is entirely tcheles, is it chayiv in tcheles, is it chayiv in tzitzis, or is it pater from tzitzis? So Moshe says, doesn't matter what the beged is made out of, whether it's made out of white or made out of blue, it's chayiv in tcheles. So Korach said, what are you talking about, Moshe Rabbeinu? A talis that's completely tcheles does not exempt itself. And, says the Medrash, v'arba chutin poiteroisa, and 4 strands, 4 strings does exempt it. Here you have the whole beged of tcheles, and it requires tcheles. And if you have a beged that's white, 4 little strings, exempted. Then Korach says, what if you have a house full of svarim? Right? Some people, they have a lot of svarim in their house. I'm not saying who, but a lot of people have a lot of svarim in their house. Do you have to put a mezuzah up on the door of a house that's full of svarim? So Moshe said, of course. So Korach said, what? The Torah itself is 275 Parshas. That doesn't exempt the house, and the 2 Parshas of the mezuzah exempts the house. Says Korach to Moshe Rabbeinu, I maintain that these mitzvahs were not given by God. You made them up, Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what the Medrash tells us. That's the connection between tzitzis, tcheles, and Vayikach Korach. What did Korach take? He took tcheles. Okay, this is something that we're all familiar with. In fact, Rashi himself brings this down. That what did Korach do? Look at number 2. He took 250 Roshei Sanhedros, primarily from Shevet Ruvain, and he gathered them together and he put them on. So the Rashi adds that Korach he dressed these 250 guys with tcheles. He said, Moshe, do they have to put strings on their tcheles, or do they not have to? So Moshe said, of course they do. So look at the lashon of Rashi. Rashi says, his chilu l'sachek alav. They started to mock Moshe. Efsher talis shel min acher. If you have a talis of white wool, chud echad shel tcheles poteres. All you need is 1 string of tcheles. And here the whole beged is made out of tcheles, and the whole beged is made out of tcheles. It doesn't exempt itself. This was the argument of Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the argument of Korach. So this brings us to a very interesting idea, and that is, if theoretically, Lu Yitzoyer, we were able to have tcheles, or when Mashiach comes and we will have tcheles again, what is the correct way to put on tcheles strings? What I mean is, how many blue strings do you need? We know the way to make tzitzis, you take 4 strings, you put it through the hole, and you double it up into 8 strings. Okay? Right? Everybody knows that. Remember when I was a kid in elementary school, Rabbi Sherman taught us how to make tzitzis, right? So he put 4 strings into the hole, makes 8, and then 7, 8, 11, 13. Fine, so you have 4 strings, you double it over. How many of those strings are supposed to be blue? So let me ask you a question, we'll see if you're on your game. Is it unanimous or is it a machlokes? Right? So hopefully it's a machlokes. It's a machlokes. What is the Rambam's opinion? The Rambam says like this. Look at number 3. The Rambam in Hilchos Tzitzis, Parak Aleph, Halacha Vav. V'yeh echad mishmoina hachutim chut tchelas. One of the 8 should be blue. V'hashiva levanim. And 7 of them should be white. Which means like this. You take 4 strings, you dye half of one, so when you put it through, 1 of the 8 is blue. That is the Shita of the Rambam. You know, as William Shakespeare said, whenever you have a Rambam, the Ravid is not far behind. Right? So the Ravid says, look at number 4, the Ravid says, Kosav HaRavid Zal. The Ravid says, now the Ravid usually doesn't agree with the Rambam. The Ravid says, so the Rambam's wrong. Ela hashnayim shel tchelas. 2 are blue, b'shisha levanim, and 6 are white. That means 1 entire string, 1 of the 4 is blue, that becomes 2. That's the shita of the Ravid. Comes Rashi, comes Tosfos, and Rashi and Tosfos in Masechta Menachos, in the very beginning of Perkat Chelas, Daf Lamed Ches, they both maintain 2 of the 4 strings are blue, for a total of 4 of 8. Got it? You take 4 strings, 2 are blue, 2 are white. So at the end of the game, 4 of the strings are blue, 4 of the strings are white. So bottom line is, if I were to ask you, how many tchela strings do you need? Rambam, 1 of 8. Ravid, 2 of 8. Rashi and Tosfos, 4 of 8. Now this presents us with a major problem. Because we know there was a man by the name of the Radziner Rebbe, who last week we learned about his adventures of how he got tchela. So fine, let's say you want to follow, and in honor of the Radziner Rebbe we have a blue signal over here, right? So in honor, so says the Radziner Rebbe maintains he found the tchelas. Who are you going to make tchelas like? Rashi, the Ravid, or the Rambam? So you say, pick them. You have a choice. You don't have a choice. By every machlokes rishonim, you got to side with one. There's only one way to do it. Either like the Rambam 1, or like the Ravid 2, or like Rashi and Tosfos 4. So you say, okay, let's paskin. Oh, wait a second. Paskin. We know we can't side in a machlokes rishonim. We know if you look in the Shulchan Aruch will deal in the Kesef Mishnah, the Rabbi Yosef Karo will quote the Rashba, the Ran, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, and he'll, through various arguments and various weighing of the Rishonim, he will determine, do we paskin like the Rambam, do we paskin like the Rif, do we paskin like the Rosh? The Ramah will add in other Rishonim. But today in 2013, we're going to stick our little necks, 2014, we're going to stick our little necks into the machlokes, Rashi, Tosfos, and the Rambam. We're going to say, I side like Rashi, I side like the Rambam, we can't stick our necks into there. It's not something we could do. So the Radziner Rebbe, and by the way, this is a very great dilemma, because even if you want to say that today we have tchelas, whatever you're going to do is going to be wrong according to most opinions. Let's say you do like the Rambam, the Ravid and Tosfos say you're not yotze the mitzvah. Let's say you say like the Ravid, the Rashi and the Rambam say not yotze. Let's say you're going to do like Rashi, the Ravid and the Rambam say not yotze. So whatever you're going to do, most Rishonim say you're wrong. So is there any way to be machriya and to try to figure out who is correct? The Rambam, 1 of 8, the Ravid, 2 of 8, or Rashi Tosfos, 4 of 8? So the Radziner Rebbe wrote a sefer called Psot Cheles. He wrote in 1888, where he brings down that Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch. Who does he paskin like? The answer is nobody, because Rabbi Yosef Karo did not involve himself in theoretical. They didn't have tchelas in the times of the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore this was halchasa de Mashicha. This was irrelevant halacha, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch did not take the trouble. Why get involved in a machlokes that has no relevance? Shulchan Aruch did not tell us what to do. But the Kesef Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef Karo says that he feels the Rambam is more correct, because the word pesil is mashma 1 string. Fine. But bottom line is, the Kesef Mishnah doesn't paskin, he just offers an argument in favor of the Rambam. Says the Radziner Rebbe, I feel the Rambam is more correct. Why? It's a medrash in this week's Parsha. Who do we learn it from? our favorite friend Korach. Korach, you see, the Radziner Rebbe got us a shiur even on Parshas Korach. And Mirza Hashem, next week he's going to get us a shiur on Parshas Chukas also. But what did Korach say to Moshe? He said, Moshe Rabbeinu, you see this beged that's completely blue? Does it need chelas? Moshe said, yeah. So Korach said, what? If you have a white-colored garment, the Medrash says, all you need is 4 chutin, 4 strings. One on one corner, one on the second corner, one on the third corner, one on the fourth corner. Who is that mashma like? The Rambam. The Medrash is clearly saying like the Rambam. So you say, no, maybe the Medrash is like Tosfos, 4 strings of tchelas on each corner. No, that's not what the Medrash is saying. Korach says to Moshe, a beged that's completely tchelas does not exempt itself, but 4 strings exempts the whole beged. So the simple meaning of the Medrash is like the Rambam. And if you look at Rashi, Rashi says like the Rambam beferish. Okay, the first Rashi in this week's Parsha. Korach tells Moshe, chut echad shel tcheles poiteres, 1 string of tcheles paters. So we have somewhat of an indication and a proof to the shita of who? The Rambam. However, you can't pass halachas from midrashim, so you have evidence to the Rambam, but nevertheless, you don't have ironclad proof. So therefore, the Radziner Rebbe wants to know, who do we paskin like? Do we paskin like the Rambam, the Ravid, or Rashi Tosfos? Says the Radziner Rebbe, look at number 8, Uleinian halacha. Says Radziner Rebbe, I feel that Shas is mashal like the Rambam. And at least there are no open questions from the Gemara on the Rambam. And the Zohar says explicitly like the Rambam. And the Mekubalim also say like the Rambam. So even though if the Mekubalim go against the halacha, of course we follow the halacha. But if there's no contradiction from the halacha to the Kabbalah, then we will side with the Balei Kabbalah. And therefore the Radziner Rebbe says, halacha l'maisa, it seems like we will go like the Rambam. And therefore, if you're going to make tchelas on your beged, 1 string. However, the Radziner Rebbe is a little bit afraid in 1888 to come out and paskin in a machlokes rishonim. Now, you have to know how much we stay away from sticking our necks into a machlokes rishonim. That's something the Shulchan Aruch could do. That's something the Ramah could do. Very rarely will the Chafetz Chaim, let's say, well, it's machlokes Rambam and the Ravid. I think we paskin this way. An Achroin would be very careful before he sides in machlokes rishonim. In fact, if you look in the Hakdama of the Biur Hagra, the children of the Gra write that one time the Gra told them that he wanted to publish a work and be machriya on every single machlokes rishonim in Shas, with irrefutable proof to one side. A few years later, the children asked the Gaon, so why didn't you do it? The Gaon said, Min hashamayim lo hinichu li. They didn't authorize me to do it. So even the Gaon, who by everyone's admission had the status of a Rishon, nevertheless could not be machriya machlokes rishonim. So for the Radziner Rebbe to come in and say who he paskin like, that's difficult to do. Now, it's not unheard of. Often, Mishnah Berurah sometimes will do something like that. So he says like this. Even though, look at number 9, even though I feel that we should pass on like the Rambam, chas v'shalom, for me to have the audacity to tell Klal Yisrael and be koveya the halachas like the Rambam. Because of course we recognize our unworthiness. And look, you have a shita of the Ravid. You have the shita of the Balei HaTosfos. And in fact, there are great Rishonim that side with the Ravid, like the Aruch, and you have Rishonim that side with the Tosfos and the Rashi, namely the Smag. And therefore the Radziner Rebbe says like this, in the bold letters in middle of number 9, V'imkein pshita, it is obvious, Mi sheyirtza linoi kechad mehanach tekifi kamoi. If you want to do like Rashi, gesundheit. You want to do like the Ravid, gesundheit. My personal preference is Rambam. I can't tell anybody what to do. If you go like any of the Bali, you know why? Says the Radziner Rebbe a very interesting chiddush, and that is, what did Klal Yisrael do before the Shulchan Aruch? Before the Shulchan Aruch said, halacha karambam, or halacha karashi, or halacha ketaisus. What did Jews do? The answer is there were different streams. Some Jews did one way, some Jews did a different way, until Klal Yisrael accepted upon themselves to follow the Shulchan Aruch. Therefore, says the Radziner Rebbe, and whatever halachas we don't have Shulchan Aruch on, some Jews are able to go like one shita, and other Jews are able to go like another shita. But, he says, you want to know my personal preference? My personal preference is, Shas is mashma like the Rambam, and the Mekubalim say like the Rambam, and the Zohar says like the Rambam, and the Sefer HaKanah says like the Rambam, and the Arizal says like the Rambam, and even the Kesef Mishnah says like the Rambam. So if you want to know my opinion, grab your measly hands and hold on to the hem of the garment of the Rambam.
Why is it 4 in each corner?
What? Why is that what?
4 colors on each.
No, 4 strings, that's the opinion of Tosfos. 2 of the strings are tchelas. But says the Radziner Rebbe, his personal preference is the Rambam. But you should know that it's not so simple just to say, okay, we're going to rely on the Rebbe to paskin. If you're a Talmud of the Radziner Rebbe, fine. But if this would be the only halacha you choose to follow him, you should know that those who put on tchelas are very unlikely to be fulfilling the mitzvah, because whatever they're doing, most Rishonim say not like it. So even if we do have tchelas today, very difficult to really get it right. To wear 3 different begadim. Yeah, on a day like today, Okay. So that is for your information. If somebody wakes you up in the middle of the night tonight, and they say, "Hey, Rabbi, how many strings of tchelas?" You'll know right away. Rambam 1, Ravid 2, Tosfos 4. Okay, fine. So, of course, the Radziner Rebbe was very into his tchelas, and he did not keep it to himself, but instead he sent out letters soliciting the opinion of all the Gedolei Yisrael, Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan, and Rabbi Shlomo Lakutna. And this week, the Radziner Rebbe sends his letter to one of the Gedolei Hadar, the Beis Halevi, Rabbi Yosef Dov. And Rabbi Yosef Dov gets the letter. And then finally, the great confrontation, the great meeting between the Radziner Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Beis Halevi. And the Radziner Rebbe says to the Beis Halevi, you're not convinced that this is tchelas? Fine. Nothing in life is 100%. But maybe it's tchelas. And if maybe it's tchelas, there's something called safek da'iraisa l'chumra, which means that if you're not sure whether you will be able to fulfill a mitzvah or not, if it's a biblical mitzvah, it's a mitzvah da'iraisa, you're mechuyev to fulfill it even misafek. Because since it's so important, it's so critical, it's so crucial, it's a da'iraisa, safek da'iraisa l'chumra. So Beis Halevi, even if you only have a 30% chance, maybe this is tchelas, you still have to wear it. So the Beis Halevi, Safek da'iraisa l'chumra does not apply in this case. Now, I wasn't there. Just want to let you know. I was not there in the year 1888. And I don't know what the Beis Halevi told the Radziner Rebbe. I am reading to you an account in the Sefer Toras Chaim. And the Toras Chaim brings down that the Beis Halevi told the Radziner Rebbe that in this case, we don't say Safek da'iraisa. Why? When do you say Safek da'iraisa l'chumra? Let's say Friday night, you finish benching, and practically in almost no shuls in the world, they say Shema on time. So mid-da'iraisa, biblically, you have to repeat all 3 parshas of Shema. It's not a mitzvah d'Rabban, it's not a chumrah, it's a biblical mitzvah. Fine. Let's say you ate the meal and you're thinking to yourself, did I say Shema? Did I not say Shema? I know that before my wife brought out the chicken, I had in mind to say Shema. I can't remember if I said it or not. Do you have to say Shema again or not? Absolutely. Safek da'iraisa l'chumra. If you're not sure if you said it, you got to say it again. Anytime you're not sure, let's say you're not sure, did I put on tefillin today? You got to do it again. I'm not sure. Did I shake the lulav and esrog? You got to do it again. A mitzvah da'iraisa, if you're not sure if you did it, you got to do it again. Says the Beis Halevi, Safek da'iraisa l'chumra only applies if after you do it the second time, you know for sure that you have the mitzvah in your pocket. But if even after you do it again, you still don't know if you fulfilled it, then there's no mitzvah to do it. So in this case, the Beis Halevi says to the Radziner Rebbe, you want me to put on your blue strings, misafek? Even if I put it on, I still don't know if I can take this mitzvah to the bank. Safek da'iraisa l'chumra is that if you're not sure, do it. This way you could be sure But if even after you do it, you're still not sure, you're not mechuyev to do it. Does this sound like a good svar? Does this not sound like a good svar?
Good. I like it. Makes sense.
No, it says one suffix. Is this tchelis or is this not tchelis? No, we're not talking now. We're not talking about someone who's not sure if he put on tchelis. He knows he didn't put on tchelis. He's not sure if this is tchelis. So suffix daraisa or no? Because bottom line, even after the fact, you're not sure if he did it. Now, by the way, Rav Moshe Sternbach in his Chuvas also brings down that this response was given by the Beis Halevi to the Radziner Rebbe. Where does this svara come from? Halt Cup. There's a sefer we're featuring for the first time. It's called Gur Aryeh Yehuda, an amazing sefer by Rabbi Menachem Zemba, the chidushim of his son. I believe his name Rabbi Yehuda Zemba Nebuch. He was killed as a bacher. He was killed, and this sefer is his peiros that Rabbi Menachem Zemba put together Le'iloi Nishmas, his son. And in the Sefer Gur Aryeh Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Menachem Zemba writes that a certain chacham told him a svara that when do you say suffix daraisa l'chumra? That is only if after you do the mitzvah, you know for sure you got the mitzvah. But if even after you did it, you're still in doubt, there's no chiyuv to do it. Says the son of Rabbi Menachem Zemba, what's the basis for the svara? The Magen Avram. Listen carefully. The Magen Avram paskins that we know Birchas Hamazon, da'iraisa or d'Rabbanan. Da'iraisa v'yachalta v'savata v'erachta. How many brachos are da'iraisa? 3. Hazanas hakol, ala aretz v'ala mazoin, and v'vnei Yerushalayim. What if you only know one bracha? Should you say, well, I only know one bracha, if anyway I'm not doing the other 2 that are da'iraisa, it's all or nothing? Or do we say, even if you can't do all 3, each one has value? So machlokes rishonim. Do you say brachos ma'akvei zuasu, or do you say ein brachos ma'akvei zuasu? If you say all 3 are necessary, so then if you only know one, there's no point in saying one if by omitting 2 and 3 you don't get the mitzvah. But if you say ein brachos ma'akvei zuasu, then let's say you have a Baal Tshuva. He doesn't know the whole benching, right? It's a very practical look. Let's say a guy comes to your house. There's no way he's reading all 3 brachos in the NCSY translator bencher. But one bracha he could get through. Do you tell him to say one, or is it all or nothing? So machlokes rishonim. One opinion is brachos ma'akvei zuazu. You have to say all 3. If you don't say all 3, you don't say any. And there's another opinion. Ein brachos ma'akvei zuazu. If you say one, it also has value. How do we paskin? Says a Magen Avram, if you don't know all 3, don't even bother starting. Why? Because it's a suffix. And misafik, you have to be machmir. And you can't say one bracha. You hear this? This is how the Magen Avram paskins. Magen Avram paskins that if you only know one bracha, so then like this. Some Rishonim hold, if I only know one bracha, I don't get the mitzvah. Some Rishonim say I do. Misafik, you have to be machmir, not bench. Says the Magen Avram in Siman Kuf Tzadi Daled. Ask the Sefer Even Ha'ezer, this is against an explicit halacha in Shulchan Aruch. What if somebody ate a big meal, Carlos and Gabby's, and he's say all the shitas? He ate not a kabeya, he ate 30 kabeya, right? And does he get them, right? And now the question is, by the end of the shiur, he's not sure, did I bench or did I not bench? Does he have to bench again? Rabbi side. If you're not sure if you bench, do you bench again? Suffix daraisa l'chumra. It's the oldest halacha in the book. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows if you're not sure if you bench again. Frekti Even Ha'ezer. If that means that if you're mesupik, whether you need to bench, you bench. So why would the Magen Avram say that if you only know one bracha, you shouldn't bench? It's a suffix. Whether the halacha is the brachas are ma'akev or the brachas are not ma'akev. We should say it's a suffix, so you got to bench and bench one bracha. The Magen Avram is an open contradiction to the oldest halacha in the hills. Right? This is, everybody knows, every kid knows. If you don't know if you bench, you got to bench. Shavik daraisa l'chumra. So if everybody knows that, why if you only know one bracha, does the Magen Avram says, well, it's a suffix. Some Rishonim say you have to say all 3, otherwise don't bother saying anything. Other Rishonim say it's all or nothing, except, right? Or the other Rishonim say, no, even one has value. Why would the Magen Avram say, you can't bench me suffix? What do you mean, suffix daraisa l'chumra? Ask the Evan Ha'ozer. Comes the Pri Megadim. Pri Megadim says, it's not a stira. If you're not sure if you benched, you know why you have to bench over? Because if you bench over, then you know for sure you got the mitzvah, and you could put the mitzvah in the bank, and you're guaranteed at least now you did the mitzvah. But if you only know one bracha, then what are you going to do? Misafek, you're going to say one bracha. But even if you say it, you can't be sure you got the mitzvah of Birchas Hamazon, because some shitas hold it's all or nothing. So we see very clearly from the Psak of the Magen Avram, who distinguishes between someone who's not sure if he benched, who has to bench again, and someone who only knows one bracha Birchas Hamazon, who the Magen Avram says, do not say it, that there's a very big difference when you say Safek Daraisa L'Chumra. If at the end of the day you could take the mitzvah and put it in the bank, then you say Safek Daraisa L'Chumra. But if at the end of the day you can't take the mitzvah and put it in the bank, because even if you do it, you still don't know if you got it, there's no rule Safek Daraisa L'Chumra. So says the son of Menachem Zemba, this svara, that supposedly the Beis Halevi told the Radziner Rebbe that, lay off already with the tchelas business. Why I should put on me Safek? There's no din Safek Daraisa L'Chumra in this case. That svara is deeply rooted in the Psak of the Magen Avram.
The son is Adam's father?
No. No, the Menachem Zemba is no relation to the Brisker, no, to the Beis Halevi. However, so it would seem like this was a pretty rational thing for the Beis Halevi to have told the Radziner Rebbe. But I don't believe the Beis Halevi ever said that to the Radziner Rebbe, because I don't think this svara is true. It's a chiluk, but you'll see, as we're about to see, lahalacha, we don't hold of it. First of all, we forgot to add one point, and that is, let's think carefully of the case of the Magen Avram. In the case of the Magen Avram, you know why the Magen Avram says that if you only know one bracha, Birchas Hamazon, you don't say it misafek? Because you have something to lose on the flip side. Because according to the opinions that Birchas Hamazon is all three or nothing, those opinions would say not only do you not get Birchas Hamazon, but if you said that bracha, it's a bracha levatala. So when there stands something to lose, only then could you make this chiluk like this. If you're not sure if you benched, you know why you have to bench again? Because at least if I bench again, I could take it to the bank. But maybe it will be a bracha levatala. It's worth being sure to be able to take the bracha to the bank, and I don't have to worry, since I'm entitled to say the Birchas Hamazon, I don't have to worry, maybe it's a bracha levatala. But in a case where even after I bench, I don't know I could take the Birchas Hamazon to the bank, then I have to be worried about bracha levatala. But if I have a garment, and it might be real tchelas, I can't excuse myself by saying, well, even if I put it on, who knows, maybe I still don't get the mitzvah. But what do you have to lose? This svara, that I'm not mechuyev to do a mitzvah, if at the end of the day I can't take it to the bank, that's only if there's something to lose on the flip side. If there's nothing to lose on the flip side, I can't excuse myself by just saying, well, don't make me do something that even if I do it, who knows?
Well, if they're considered puzzle, you got something to lose.
No, they're not puzzle. They're still fine, so it's not chelas, but it's a lavan. That's first of all. Second of all, the Mishnah Berurah does not hold of the svara, because the Mishnah Berurah paskins halach lamaisa, and remember this, that if you only know one bracha, Birchas Hamazon, not like the Magen Avram, you should say Birchas Hamazon. Why? Because you always say Safek Daraisa L'Chumra, even in a case where, even after you do it, you're unsure if you get the mitzvah. So even if you want to maintain that this svara is deeply rooted in the Magen Avram, Mishnah Berurah argues with it. And by the way, it's almost unanimous. What's the halacha? You have one pair of tefillin. You're not sure if it's kosher or not. You put it on or you don't put it on? Yeah, you're at home, no bracha. Obviously you can't make a bracha. But you have one pair of tefillin. You're stuck on a desert island, one pair of tefillin. Might be good, might not be good. Do you wear it?
Yes.
Of course you wear it. What do you mean? But even after I wear it, who knows? Maybe I don't get tefillin. You got to take a shot at it. You have one lulav and esrog. It might be good, it might not be good. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to take it, because even if I take it, who knows, I might not get the mitzvah. Mishnah Berurah paskins consistently throughout the Sefer that whenever you have the opportunity to do a mitzvah, even if it's only a safek, you do it. So even, I don't think the Beis Halevi offered a svara to the Radziner Rebbe, you'll say based on the Magen Avram, First of all, Magen Avraham is in a limited case where there's a downside of bracha levatala. And anyway, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't hold of it. And we saw the Yeshua's Malkai, Rabbi Shmuel Lakutna, when the Radziner Rebbe said, put on my tcheles, Yeshua's Malkai says, what do you want from me? The Gedolim don't accept it. But that argument that you said, that if maybe it's tcheles, I would be mechuyev to put it on, Yeshua's Malkai says that's a solid argument. Because if there is really a decent chance that it's tcheles, then says Yeshua's Malkai number 21, we would apply the rule, Safek Dairaisa L'chumra. But who knows, even after the fact, I don't know, I'm getting it? That's good in the world of where there's a downside. Where there's no downside, we have no evidence that this svara applies. And in fact, I found in a Sefer Chitzei Giborim that Rav Aaron Soloveitchik would say he has no tradition that this argument was given by the Beis Halevi. So even though it's reported in the Sefer Taras Chaim and in Ramosha Sturmbach, but why should we say the Beis Halevi offered a svara that is not ois gehalten, that is not really lahalacha according to the Mishnah? So again, I wasn't there. If he said it, and he feels the Magen Avraham is a proof, then okay. But we don't know what happened. We could perhaps suggest that maybe this was not an argument that the Beis Halevi offered. Another supposed argument that the Beis Halevi offered is quoted in the Sefer Taras Chaim, and also in the Sefer Uvdois v'Hanhagos l'Beis Brisk. This is a classic Briska svara that supposedly the Beis Halevi offered. And that is, the Beis Halevi said that if your great-grandfather didn't wear tchelas, and your grandfather didn't wear tchelas, and your father didn't wear tchelas, even if you knew 100% through science, through technology, that this is tchelas, it's not tchelas. It's not tchelas, but it is tchelas. It's the same tchelas. But we went back in a time machine. We saw Moshe Rabbeinu use. No. The definition of Judaism is if your grandfather did it, if your father did it, and he told you to do it. But if they didn't tell you to do it, even if it is, it's not. You need a positive Messiah. Without Messiah, there's no Judaism. So that would, right? That means, if, let's say, Chas v'shalom lo yaleinu, we didn't have tefillin for a few generations, and then finally we discovered scientifically how they made tefillin, we couldn't wear tefillin anymore. It wouldn't be tefillin.
Turkey.
What?
Turkey.
Turkey?
Yeah. The Ashkenazim didn't know whether it's...
Okay, that's a good point. We're going to get back to the turkey soon. Hold on to the turkey. Right? Haidu for the turkey. Thank you. Fine. So, that is the svara that supposedly the Beis Halevi gave, that even if you know, if your father put on tcheles, so then you could put on tcheles. But if it was not given from generation to generation, this is not tcheles. In fact, the Grid, the son of the Griz, they were once walking together. They went on vacation in Kranitz, and there was a relative of the Radziner Rebbe, and guess what he was into? You got it. He was into tcheles. And there are different versions. It's a machlokes between two brisker svarim. Who this relative of the Radziner Rebbe tried to convince to put on tcheles? Did he try to convince the Grid, or did he try to convince the Griz? It's machlokes. Different versions of the story. Either way, and I'm not going to be machriya. Who am I to be machriya? The details of the story, right? But either way, they tried to persuade one of them, and he didn't go for it. So the relative said, I'll give you a bag full of tcheles, very expensive item. Imagine a bag full of tcheles. He didn't go for it. So later, the Grid asked the Griz, why don't we put on tcheles? So the Beis Halevi said the following. There's a pasuk, Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha, Zekenecha v'yomrulach. There are two traditions in Klal Yisrael. There's the tradition of Torah. Grandfather teaches the next generation, and then there are traditions of reality, which means like this. There is no reality without Messiah. If our father didn't tell us a cow is a cow, even if the cow says moo, and the cow, you can milk the cow, and the cow's name is Elsie, you can't eat the cow. Because if your father didn't tell you this is what a cow is, it's not a cow. This is a different element of Messiah. It's an element of Messiah. In other words, we claim we don't even know reality without tradition. And therefore says the Beis Halevi, yeah, maybe this is tcheles, but if the Zayda didn't wear it and the Tata didn't wear it, then for us to wear it, we're not wearing tcheles. But what do you mean? Technology has tested that the exact chemical proportions of this shade of color is the same as, doesn't matter, it's not tcheles. And by the way, we have here number 25 that Rabbi Yasher Ber Soloveitchik in his shiurim, that in his Yartzeit shiurim, famous Yartzeit shiurim, he said explicitly that he has a tradition that the Beis Halevi, when he did not want to put on the Tcheles of Radziner Rebbe, the argument he gave was that without positive Messiah, we cannot even identify the reality of Metzias. Now, did the Beis Halevi in fact use this argument? Again, I wasn't there. I can't tell you. But is this a valid svara? Is this a valid argument that if your grandfather didn't wear tcheles, so you're not going to wear tcheles? Is that a halachic svara? In my humble opinion, it's hard to make the case that halachically that would exempt a person from doing a mitzvah. The Torah says wear tcheles. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. So your grandfather didn't have it? What if you came from Russia and for 3 generations there were no mitzvahs? So now you're not mechuyev in mitzvahs anymore? Of course not. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. We have 613 mitzvahs. You try to do the mitzvahs to the best of your ability. Yeah, but the Tata didn't do it. Okay, that's something very important. That's a very important concept in Judaism. Certainly we want to follow the Masorah of our parents, but in a halachic sense, if we could prove scientifically through technology that this is tcheles, in my opinion, it's hard to make the case that that would exempt a person from being mekayim a mitzvah. In Russia, they didn't wear tefillin for 3 generations. Does that mean their descendants are exempt from tefillin? So you say, no, well, at least some of Klal Yisrael were mekayim tefillin, so it wasn't lost from the Jewish people. But if it's completely lost from the Jewish people, then the Messiah is severed? I don't know, maybe. But if you look in the Rambam tells us in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, the Rambam says, where did I get all my calculations from? Where do I get all my computations from? The Rambam says, maybe you'll think I got it from all those astronomy books that the Shevet Yisachar wrote, like the Gemara tells us, that Shevet Yisachar compiled books of astronomy. Says the Rambam, we don't have those books. So where do all my calculations come from? The Greek astronomers. The Rambam writes this, not in the Moreh Nevuchim, in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. How we paskin today, the Greek astronomers. Says the Rambam, this is not going to look good on my shidduch resume that I follow the Greek astronomers to paskin Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. Says the Rambam, look, if you have, not theory, not, have a hypothesis, if you have clear mathematical formulas, if you have scientific formulas that are absolute, that cannot be refuted, that are black and white, then you got to go with it. Says the Rambam, when it comes to reality, says the Rambam explicitly, it doesn't matter if it's from Nevi'im, if it doesn't matter if it's from Chachmei Umas Ha'olam. Again, this is not to say that every theory which is just an idea, you follow. No. But if it's black and white, 4 plus floor equals 8. Where'd you get that from? I read in my math book. But what do you mean? It was published by Goyim. Yeah, but I could count on my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, but you got it from Goyim. I don't care where I got it from. If it's something God gave you a brain, if it's something that you see as black and white with your own brain, then you follow it, la halacha. That's what the Rambam writes. Says the Rambam, the last 4 lines, Shekol davar shenizgala tamay. Anything that has been revealed, I'm not talking about regular science. Regular science is just, theory. But if you have proof that has no question, then it's not, you're not relying on the Greeks. You're relying on your own brain that God gave you. You're not relying on the Goyim, you're relying on your mind. Says the Rambam says that, he says, Sfarim that were compiled by the Goyim, we lost. And therefore, if we have ideas, theories, that are proven, not maybe, proven, you rely on el halacha. So to say, in a halachic sense, that we don't put on tcheles because my grandfather didn't put on tcheles, Maybe if you had a halachic reason not to put on tchelas and you want to add to that, well, you're my grandfather, but just purely you don't do it, well, your grandfather they didn't discover it. They didn't discover it. Well, you use light, you don't say, right? You turn on the light, you use candles. My father didn't use electricity. Of course not. You use it, right? So, in a halachic sense, but on Pesach, okay, Pesach, special thing, minhag avisim yodin. But when you come to a mitzvah d'oraisa, you want to pater yourself because it wasn't done? Well, now we know it. So again, to say, and I just want to prove that, if you remember we learned last week, many poskim say, the Radvaz and the Malbim write, that it's possible for tchelas to be discovered. So I ask you a question. Malbim. The Malbim would come in here, he would maintain, he writes explicitly in Arsas Chaim, that it's possible for tchelas to be discovered. Wait a second, Malbim. Even if tchelas was discovered, my Zayda didn't wear tchelas. So who cares if it's discovered? So the Malbim would say, but if we discover tchelas, your Zayda didn't wear it, but you're going to wear it. The Radvaz also says tchelas could be discovered. The Oilas Tamid we have in the Shira Nu Maramakam. The halacha is, Bizman Hazeh, we cannot make tzitzis out of a linen garment. Why? Why? So it's a gezerah, you might put on tchelas. But what do you mean? You're allowed to put tchelas on linen. You're allowed to have shatnez and tzitzis. And you might wear it at night. And at night is lav zman tzitzis. So the Oilas Tamid asks, yeah, but we don't have tchelas. So why can't you make a pishtan garment with, says Oilas Tamid, because you might find tchelas. But who cares, even if you find it? My Zayda didn't wear it. See, you see from the poskim that if we found tchelas, we would have to wear it. It's black and white. And by the way, the Levush, we know, Mordechai Yafa wrote the classic work on halacha, Levush Mordechai, and his work on Orach Chaim is called Levush Tchelas. And he writes, why do I call it Levush Tchelas? He says explicitly, look at number 29, that just like a person would be obligated to put on Tchelas if he found it, a person is obligated to learn Orach Chaim. What do you mean a person's obligated to put on Tchelas if he found it? No, he wouldn't be. The Zayda didn't wear it, the Tata didn't wear it, so he wouldn't be obligated to wear Tchelas. So you see, while this is maybe a nice sentiment, halachically, it's very hard to exempt you from a mitzvah d'oraisa just because it wasn't done. And in fact, Rabbi say, we don't know what the Beis Halevi said to the Radziner Rebbe. All we know is the letter the Beis Halevi wrote to the Radziner Rebbe, which is printed in the Sefer Psal Tchelas. And never, at least in this letter, the Beis Halevi does not tell the Radziner Rebbe that, well, the Tata didn't do it, so why should I do it? He says much different than that. If you read the letter, look at number 30. He says, and not only does he say different, he says against this svara that they maintain, he said. The Radziner Rebbe says like this. The Beis Halevi says, you Radziner Rebbe, you claim the chilazon is what? The cuttlefish. Right? We said the cuttlefish is a squid. It's one of the 19 species of squid. I have a question for you, Radziner Rebbe. What are you, a marine biologist? You discovered it? You went snorkeling and you found the cuttlefish? No. This fish, how long has this fish been known about? 2,000 years. What do people do with this fish? They make ink. For how long have they been making ink? For 2,000 years. So this is not a new fish. It's the well-known fish. This is the classic fish that you made. Your big pens in 1888 came from the cuttlefish. So I have a question for you. If they knew about the cuttlefish and they knew how to make ink, why weren't they using it for tchelas for 2,000 years? If my Elta Zayda had the fish, and my Zayda had the fish, and my Tata had the fish, and they weren't using it, that shows I have a Messiah. This is not the fish. Not that, well, if my father didn't wear it, then it's not tchelas. If it's tchelas, it's tchelas. If it's blue, it's blue. If you know a mitzvah is a mitzvah, you got to do it. Doesn't matter what was done before. But if for generations it was available, and your Elta Zayda, who's a bigger tzaddik than you, rejected it, and your Zayda rejected it, so then obviously they rejected it for a reason. That's a negative Messiah. You don't need a positive. So in fact, according to this letter of the Beis Halevi, this letter is saying that whatever legend there is, that the Beis Halevi said you need a positive Messiah, though the Beis Halevi is saying explicitly that you don't need a positive Messiah, because his argument is that since this fish was available for a very, very long time, so then we make the case that not only do we not have a positive Messiah, we have a negative Messiah. So just to summarize where we're holding over here with the great adventures of the Radziner Rebbe, right? First of all, we learned there are 3 shittos in the Rishonim. Rambam 1 string, Ravid 2 strings, Tosfos and Rashi 4 strings. Radziner Rebbe feels Rambam is most correct. He's not forcing anyone to follow that opinion, but he feels the Rambam is more accurate. Then we discussed the argument of Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra. When does it apply? We offered a possibility that Safek D'Oraisa only applies if after the fact, if post facto, you could take the mitzvah and put it in the bank. Then we said, well, we don't have a clear proof to that because maybe the Magen Avram only used that svara in a situation where you have something to lose, and namely a bracha levatala. But in a situation where you have opportunity to do a mitzvah, even though you can't be certain you'll be getting the mitzvah, misafik, you probably would have to do the mitzvah. And then finally, what did the Beis Halevi tell the Radziner Rebbe? Now listen carefully. If he told the Radziner Rebbe that my Zayda didn't wear it and my Tata didn't wear it, so I'm not going to do it, that would be a logic that applies to any tchelas they find. Whether it's the cuttlefish, we're going to see whether it's Rav Herzog's tchelas, whether it's today's tchelas, the Murex trunculus. Bottom line is, my Zayda didn't wear this, so I don't have to do it. But if that's not a valid svara, if that's not a real svara, if the svara was not, well, my father didn't do it, so I don't have to. If the svara was, everybody knew about this and nobody used it, so obviously this is not it, then if we are able to find possibly a new chilazon that was not known and had not been discovered, then perhaps we can't get away with saying, well, my father didn't wear it. My father didn't wear it because they didn't discover this fish then, or they didn't know how to produce the dye. So it's very important to know what the Beis Halevi in fact told the Radziner Rebbe. In a halachic purpose, for halachic sense, it's hard to exempt somebody from a mitzvah just because it wasn't done. That's maybe not enough of a reason. And then you should know the Radziner Rebbe, again, he spread the tcheles to thousands of Hasidim. Besides his own Hasidim, Breslov chapped on to this tcheles. They got very into the Radziner Rebbe's tcheles. Many Gedolim, the Marsham, Rebbe Panovitcher. Unfortunately, the Radziner Rebbe did not have Arichas Yamim. 2 years after his discovery, he became extremely ill. He was in Warsaw at the time. He could barely make it out of Warsaw. Finally, they carry him back to Radzin. It's the last Shabbos of his life, and he's nebuch suffering with terrible Yisurim. And they say, Rebbe, give a krechts, give a cry. And he said, no, I don't have any tinus on the Rebbe, I don't have any complaints. And he was makabel the Yisurim b'shtika gamor, did not utter a word. When the Radziner Rebbe passed away in the year Tafresh Nun Aleph 1891, it was the 4th day of Teves. They appointed his son. The son of the Radziner Rebbe was Rav Mordechai Yosef Elazar, the Tiferes Yosef, who continued Radzina Tzitzis and Chasidus for another 29 years until the year 1929. Now he gave over the factories. They had factories of tchelas in Radzin. He gave it over under the expert proficiency of a chassid by the name Rabbi Yeshua Kittelgisser. 1929, 26th day of Shvat, the Tiferes Yosef passes away, Rav Mordechai Yosef Elazar passes away, and they appoint his son, Rav Shmuel Shloima, the Kadosh Vitar, who led Radziner Chasidus until the year 1939. But when he took over, he said, I'm not giving over tchelas to any businessmen, to any middlemen. In fact, everyone out! I will be the only one to know the secret formula to make tchelas. And his brother-in-law said, let me help you out. He said, you want to help me out? I'm mechabed you to schlep water from the well and bring it to the factory. That's your kibbud. But no one's going to know the ingredients of tchelas and how to make it. And he maintained he was the sole proprietor of the tchelas industry. 1939, the war breaks out. He tries to help his Hasidim. He's cornered. He fasts for 3 days. Nebuch, he dies al Kiddush Hashem. He's murdered al Kiddush Hashem. What happens to Radzina tchelas? Nobody knows. Nobody knows how in the world the Radziner Rebbe was able to extract the dye, to turn the dye from black to blue. After the Shmuel Shloima was murdered, his brother-in-law, the son-in-law of the earlier Rebbe, is appointed after the war as the next Rebbe. He's a tzaddik, he's a kadosh, he's a tahar. But what's Radziner Chasidus without the blue tchelas? The Hasidim are searching, they go to chemists. Finally, in 1952, the chemists are able to replicate the same color, but in a different way. And the Hasidim said, this ain't the way the Rebbe used to do it. And it would seem like Radziner tzitzis would not be able to recover. How are we going to be able to retrieve Radziner tchelas? And a miracle happened. There was a rabbi in Paris by the name of Rabbi Halevi Herzog, the father of the first chief rabbi of Israel, who happened to be interested in tchelas, who had written to the Radziner Rebbe, not the first one, the second one, if the Radziner Rebbe could please give him the secret formula. And sure enough, the Radziner Rebbe was more than happy to write in a sealed envelope the secret formula. He even sent some of it to Rav Herzog. Rav Herzog, who was the chief rabbi of Paris, gave it to his son, the first chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog, Zecher Tzaddik L'Bracha, who secretly carried with him the letter of the Radziner Rebbe. And one day, one of the Radziner Hasidim got word that the first chief rabbi has the official document from the Radziner Rebbe how to make tchelas, and they contact Rav Herzog, and he is more than happy to share with them the letter. And they try to read the letter, they can't decipher it, it's cryptic, they can't make heads or tails. And finally, after much yigia and much amelus, through the help of Rav Herzog, who by the way wrote his doctorate on tchelas, and Emir Hashem, in 2 weeks, we're going to learn about what Rav Herzog held about the tchelas of the Radziner Rebbe, through the efforts of the first chief rabbi of Israel, and through his father, and through the Amelus and the Yegia and the Mesiras Nefesh of Radziner Hasidim, they were able to restore traditional Radziner tchelas ad hayom in the very same way that Rav Gershon Henoch Leiner discovered it when he went to the great aquarium in Naples in the year 1889. And ad hayom, Radziner Hasidim proudly wear the authentic, I still have white, the authentic tchelas of the Radziner Rebbe. But what did Rav Herzog say about this tchelas? Stay tuned for more adventures with the Radziner Rebbe in an upcoming Shiur.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.